So the righteousness he's talking about isn't works righteousness. It is the outflow, the outcome of fear of the Lord. The wickedness of the wicked deeds of the wicked deeds of the wicked, is an outcome of their refusal to fear the Lord. So this is about the outworking of our relationship with God, or lack of a relationship with God, right?
Yeah.
I just want to say that up front, that so much of it seems to be about deeds or speech, that kind of thing. We're talking about, we claim a walk with Christ, we claim a faith in Christ. Is it producing that which looks like the wisdom, the righteous wisdom of Proverbs, or are we more on the deeds of the flesh kind of end, as we guys were talking about in our Bible study at the beginning? Okay, give me your observations.
There's a lot about the tongue, that the entire thing. I
Yes.
really like verse 16. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. Fools are easily insulted. The prideful.
They are, and how do they display that they are easily insulted?
Shouting
Vocally.
about it and defending themselves and
Right.
Proclaiming that they are
Yeah,
the
it's
light.
known at once.
Proclaiming
You
it.
know, it is a sign of a fool when you know how he's feeling as soon as he feels it. Without, okay.
Claiming that he's the victim.
Oh, okay. Yeah, claim that. All of that. The point is how quickly you know it. That's the point he's getting at, right?
It's a great chapter.
It's what?
It's a great
Oh,
chapter.
it's a great chapter. Well, it's in the Bible, so of course it is. Give me your observations.
I like verse 13. The evil man is being ensnared by his own actions, his
Okay.
own speech, but the righteous is escaping from that. Like the evil brings it upon himself, but those who are righteous are protected in a way.
In the path of righteousness is life, and in its pathway there is no death.
Okay, what else?
verse 8. You go on.
He who is reproof is stupid.
You kind of.
Our words matter. Verse 25, anxiety weighs a man down, but a good word makes him glad. We can encourage
That's right.
others, and lying is not a way to do that.
I was gonna I will add on to that. Verse 18.
Yeah, exactly.
There is one whose words are like, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing.
Good.
So
Okay.
that's basically verse 25, even more.
Yes.
straight.
Yes,
It's like
it is. You're right.
for good
They go
and
together very well.
damage.
For sure. Okay, what else?
A person that you can't expect to walk around. God's got has got my back. Blah blah blah. You got to work at it. And like the one who works his land will have plenty of food. I mean, you're not here to diligence. Thank you. Good word.
God approves of a strong work ethic. Surprise, surprise. And God wove his creation in such a way that a strong work ethic, wherever you find it, will usually lead to some measure of earthly, physical, material stability. It's not, just a work ethic by itself is not indication of righteousness, but a righteous person will have a work ethic.
To add on what we were saying before and tied into this, verse 19 is, a truthful lips will endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. There is longevity to the righteous, but the wicked are simply up and gone, and it's the next one coming.
This has to do with words.
Yeah.
That's
It's
not
like-
exactly what you said, but I'm...
Yeah, basically, when you work hard with your lips, not working on it. Same concept with your mouth. It
Some of us work
waxes.
hard with our lips.
Fair enough.
We make part of our living that way. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
The size of his breakfast bowl.
Don't think that's quite. I think the direction's wrong, but yes, go ahead.
It's like a lot of contrast between truth and like falsehood, and so wisdom, truth, righteousness, all of those are kind of lumped together. And then you have falsehood, fool, evil, are all kind of grouped in categories.
Mhm. Good.
I like the fact that, well, I know we already went to verse 13, but the evil man will be ensnared by the transgression of his lips. Sometimes it feels like the evil don't ever have any consequences. Like, it feels like they just keep getting away with it and they tend to prosper sometimes because they have a smooth
That's right.
tongue or whatever, and it can feel like they're not getting the just reward, but God says they will.
Yeah. What you just said, I would say, welcome to Ecclesiastes and Job, right? Because those two books spend a fair bit of time on what happens when society has broken down to one degree or another, and it appears that the wisdom of Proverbs is turned on its head because we live in a fallen world. And remember a point I made very early on in our series, about 1 million years ago at this point, is that the book of Proverbs, the wisdom of the book of Proverbs prevails in a covenant setting. It prevails in remember it was written, the original setting was Israel under the covenant of God. And as they obeyed the covenant, or obeyed God within the bounds of the covenant, because they feared him, because they loved him, because they trusted him, right? Generally speaking, the wisdom of Proverbs bore out. It was when that covenant community stopped behaving as a covenant people that you get things like the traumas of Psalm 73, where he says, I was almost lost. I had almost given up, because the wicked prosper, they grow fat and happy, and they die with their children surrounding them. They die in happy homes. They die giving all this so much wealth to their children, and they die, but they don't die soon. Well, what happened? Right? And the psalmist there in Psalm 73 says, but when I went into the house of the Lord, I'm paraphrasing, I got my head back on straight and I realized their ultimate end. Yeah. And you're right. Ultimately, it will work out exactly like this. What else?
I like the fact it's where's the verse? Anyway, the righteous care even about their animals.
Oh yeah, that's so
But
good.
even the wicked, even when they're being quote unquote kind, it's cruel.
Yeah.
Their best is still cruel.
It's verse
10, thank you. I couldn't
Righteous
find the
care
quote.
about, and I'm just going to put it this way, the lowly.
Yeah.
One commentator I looked at made the point, and I think he's right, that if the righteous care even for the animals, how would you expect, or what would you expect to find from the righteous in terms of, say, a slave?
Even better than
Even
the
better,
animals.
right? Right?
And that goes to verse 9 as well. Better to be lowly and have a servant
Right.
than to pretend you're great and
Yeah.
you don't have bread.
Yeah. Yeah, that idea of the servant comes up there. Though which verse was that?
That's
Verse
9.
9, is making a little bit different point. And we kind of need to come back to that. I'm going to ask you something here in a moment, but real quick, any other observations? Okay. As we read through, and I mentioned this before, So here's a little exercise. If you have to sit there and scan the chapter again real quick, did you notice any blocks? Any contextual blocks? Any thematic, as in there's a theme, a block, or blocks?
What do you mean?
Where a block of verses,
Kind of go together.
they go together. Observe that too.
I see a few.
I'm sorry?
I kind of see a few.
Okay, well, I'm out of room, but here, I'll clear a little bit and kind of right back up there. What do you see? Give me one.
The one kind of in the chunk with, kind of like verses 9 and on, but it's kind of, it's, I was hard to put in words, but like, it's having to deal with work of your hands, I guess, a little bit,
Okay.
and,
Yeah.
I don't know. I can like
noticed,
see the connection, but it's like,
I noticed verse 1 to verse 7 is a chunk, and verse 8 to verse 14 is a chunk. Hannah was focusing on 8 to 14.
Okay.
And verse...
So, don't just identify the verse. Why is 1 through 7 a chunk? What do you see that binds that together? What theme is binding it together?
Verse 3 is good. No one's established by wickedness.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being established, righteous, and wickedness, and...
I'm sorry?
it was like family.
I didn't notice that. I'm just saying that verse 1 to 7 is about wickedness and being established,
Okay.
reproof and judgment,
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then verse 9, 8 to 14, like Hannah was saying, is more about physical aspects of being righteous
Okay.
and diligence.
All right. That's hard to write all that down.
Yeah,
I'm going to stop writing. We'll just talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are those chunks, or did I just bring those up?
Yeah, sort of. How do I put it? How do I put it? There are probably different ways of looking or combining the verses, because there is a little bit of a sense of maybe a little bit of a stream of consciousness within there as it kind of moves from subject to subject to subject. So you get some larger blocks, you get some smaller blocks within, you get some larger blocks, some smaller blocks within. Okay, what else do you see? There's more.
There's always more.
There's always more.
Kind of like a blocks of righteousness and blocks of stupidity.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. Yes.
First,
Go ahead.
well, I mean, they're all kind of overlapping,
Mhm.
but,
Yeah. I agree.
verse 15 through at least, 22, there's a lot of focus there on words,
Mm-hmm.
and the words of a fool in particular versus the words of a wise man or a truthful man. But there's a lot more focus on what you're going to be hearing out of the mouth of a fool.
That's right. And I would say it starts in verse 14.
Yeah, at least the only thing I said 13 is that the evil man is ensnared by
Oh,
the
you said-
transgression of his lips.
Did you say 13?
You said 15.
I intended to say 13.
Okay,
I don't
nope.
know what I said, but I intended to
Oh,
say
I get that.
13.
I get that. Yes, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I agree with you. There's a thematic chunk about words.
Bless you.
And
The food
the
time.
words of a fool.
Yes. Yep, what else?
Bless you.
Tell me how verses 8 and 9 kind of stick together. And all I hear is the clock. Tell me how verses 8.
Verse 8 is weird. A man is condemned according to his...
Commended.
Commended.
Okay, I'm like, condemned.
That would change the whole sense of it. Yes.
Yeah, like, I mean, sure, condemned could be a positive thing, like punishment is good and bad, but
Don't try. Stop
Consequences.
trying. Stop trying. Work with the word that's there. That will help. Okay, so reading it that way, look at verses 8 and 9. Let me praised,
Oh.
which is why my translation has praised.
Yeah, mine is praise too.
Praised.
Nasby.
A person will be praised according to his insight, but one of perverse mind will be despised. Okay? How do verses 8 and 9 stick together?
You have the sense to work, and that's kind of...
Okay?
verse 9 is the application of verse 8.
It is in a way.
Verse 8 is telling you basically practically what you should do, and verse 9 is, so here's what it looks like.
Maybe. Okay, tell me how verses 4, 8, and 9 stick together. Didn't mean to make it hard, I'm sorry. 4, 8, and 9.
Have character and don't be so, and it's a character, the way you act and the way you, I can't even think of the word I'm looking for.
Let me show you something here. Okay, verse 4, which, by the way, folks, you young ones especially, particularly, verse 4 is huge. Okay, guys, it's huge. Ladies, it's huge. Just huge, huge, huge. It's advice. It's advice particularly to a son, because that's why it talks about a wife. But, young ladies, as you, Lord willing, someday become wives, it is sort of a kind of a backwards way to talk about your character. An excellent wife is the crown of her husband. What is a crown? What is that? Glory? So an excellent wife is the glory?
He gets praised for such a good wife. For getting
Honor?
Honor, yeah.
Crown of her husband. But she who shames him is like rottenness in his bones. So the crown is opposite the rottenness. But excellent wife is opposite she who shames, which tells us that the crown is somehow related to the opposite of shame. We're talking about honor, right? Right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So an excellent wife is the honor of her husband. A shameful wife, what is rottenness in his bones? What does that do to a person?
Makes his bones fall apart.
Okay.
Just
What's that?
brings him down.
Cancer.
It's destructive. Tears him down at the core of his being, right? You can't stand up without your bones. Guys, look for an excellent wife. God-honoring, God-glorifying, biblical kind of wife. Ladies, be that. Right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, good job. But the concern of Solomon for his son in verse 4 is for his honor. Son, you want to be honored. You don't want to be shamed? Find a good wife. So it's a concern for his honor. Now look at verse 8. A person will be
Praise.
honored, praised, according to his,
Insight.
what is then? What is insight?
Good sense.
Good sense is wisdom, right? So, son, find a good wife. She'll bring you honor. Son, grow in wisdom. It'll bring you honor. So verses 4 and 8 are tied together because there's a concern with good esteem. Your honor, your public esteem, your reputation. But then, what does verse 9 do?
It turns on its head.
A little bit. And what does it say?
Better to be lowly and observant.
What's your
Well, actually, that
version say?
Better is one who is lightly esteemed and has a servant than one who honors himself and lacks bread.
It's honor is not always what we think it is.
Okay, it's not always what we think it is. There's a person. In verse 9. There's a person who's actually who's not quite too concerned with his honor.
Yeah.
Honor's not the most important thing. There's a sense where he's saying, for all of that, don't be so worried about your honor if it's going to cost you getting some good help. Yeah, that's what he's saying. It's better to not have it's better to have a little less of a reputation as long as if you've got good help.
But then verse 9 it goes on to then to play the great man. Could it be so lowly is the translation I have there, better to be humble and have a servant, like not so...
be too concerned with your own honor.
Yeah. Than to pretend to be great and to be promoting yourself.
Sure, yeah.
And not have enough to eat.
And prove to be actually fake.
Yeah.
It's a facade. So in other words, there's a genuine concern for honor, and here are some practical things. 2, right off the top. Have a good wife and be wise. And it will contribute to your public reputation. On the other hand, don't be so worried about your public reputation that you actually oversell yourself and end up not even having enough to eat.
The second half of verse 9 sounds like presidential candidates when they're running.
Let's not go to politics, please.
No, just because of the nature of how hard they have to try to promote themselves to win, that's what ends up happening.
But you kind of see it there. They're sort of there's a legitimate concern for honor and reputation. And then you turn around and go, but I'm not going to make everything about that.
Yeah, be humble about it. Yeah.
Right? So there's a balancing act that's happening here. And it takes wisdom to go, at what point am I fighting for my honor? At what point am I going, let someone else fight that battle for me if they want to, as long as I've got help, I've got my family, I'm not left alone, I'm not abandoned, right? There's just a certain sense of, could be something to worry about. Right? It's just very practical, but it takes some wisdom to sort of, as we say, suss that out, sort that out, right? But you see how we kind of pulled these together and go, oh, there's a theme here, and like, whoa, what did he just do there? And by pulling those together, you're like, oh, that gives it a little different facet to that aspect of that part of the wisdom discussion.
Was it kind of like there's honor in doing and saying what is right, but it's not chasing honor for the sake of honor. It's not the end in of itself. I mean, it can be somewhat of a reward appropriately when you're doing things God's way. But if that's what you start chasing, well,
that's exactly
now
right.
you start making its own thing.
Even Jesus gave instructions like, don't put yourself forward at the feast with a ruler and sit at the highest spot at the table. Sit at the lowest spot at the table you can find. And his whole motivation for instructing them is you will be embarrassed when you sit at the highest spot and the master of the feast tells you you don't deserve that spot, you need to move down. But if you sit at the lowest spot, he doesn't necessarily invite you to the top spot, but he invites you further up the table. You look good. I mean, this is our Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God made flesh, come to live and die and live again for us. And he's saying, there's a way to look better. There's a way not to look a fool. And by the way, when you do that, you lose your voice when you're a fool. When you look a fool.
Don't be a snob.
Right, don't be a snob. And you will actually gain the opportunity to speak. When you deliberately humble yourself and allow someone else to move you up the table, you get an opportunity to speak. You're more attractive that way too, in terms of your wisdom, as opposed to, I'm sitting myself here, I think I deserve it. Remember, he's telling the disciples this, who are constantly arguing about
Who's first?
Who's first and who sits next to Jesus in the kingdom. And he says, stop it, guys. If you sit there and you get put down, everyone's going, and they won't listen to you. You've got nothing to contribute at that point, right? So there's some practical, it's not just about looking good. But you see how we kind of pulled some of these together and found some themes running, going, oh, we give nuance, right? Just a couple more minutes, and boy, there's a lot more here, but anything else jump out to you?
Eight-
Go ahead, Patty. Go ahead.
18, one who's, I don't know what your version is, but there is one who speaks rashly like a piercing sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing.
That's right.
Basically, watch what you're saying.
Yeah. When we use our mouths to tear people down, it's the opposite of healing, right? And we shouldn't be surprised then when people avoid us, right? Go ahead, Jenny.
Proverbs 31:26. One of the characteristics of that excellent wife, she opens her mouth with wisdom,
That's right.
and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue.
That's exactly right. By the way, that is that excellent wife that is a crown to her husband. In fact, it even mentions in Proverbs 31 that her husband sits in the gates, right? He sits in a high position in the town. Why? Because his wife is such a support and such an honor to him that he looks better than maybe he really is. Yes, Patty, the way we speak, the things we can do with our mouths, the effect we can have. I want to, with verse 18, look at verse 20. Yeah, we'll end there. Verse 20. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but counselors of peace. Does anyone have anything different from counselors?
Those who plan peace.
Those who plan peace? Okay. Those who plan peace, or counselors of peace, have joy. That business of peace, I want to point out that verse 20 is more relational than it sounds at first. The counselor of peace, or the planner of peace, is the peacemaker, the shalom maker. He's affecting other people, right? He's a person who brings, or she is a person who brings peace, who brings, and remember I've told you before about that word shalom? Remember what I told you? Does anybody remember? I defined it. It's really important in Hebrew thought.
Is it like an inner kind of peace?
No, actually,
No.
sorry, no, it's not. It's not really the subjective sense of peace. What's that word?
Wholeness.
Huh?
Wholeness.
Wholeness.
So that word peace there, is that shalom,
Shalom.
that wholeness?
Wholeness. The idea of that which makes whole, kind of heals. It heals. So when Jewish people wish each other shalom, they're not just wishing, I hope you enjoy a subjective sense of peace. Now, clearly that would be part of it. But they're wishing for each other, I wish for you, I pray for you that you would experience a wholeness of life, an integrity of life, a completeness of life, right? A healing of life. So the counselor of peace, a counselor or the planner of shalom, experiences joy. Yes, that's subjective. Yes, that's for me. But there's a peacemaking aspect to it, right? There's an effect on other people. And deceit, okay, the first line. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil. That's relational. We tell lies because to each other, right? Deceit is me to you. So it's relational. There's two parties in verse 20. Each line, there's two parties. So just as in verse 18, there is a rash speaking that destroys, in verse 20, there is a deceitful speaking that destroys. In verse 18, there is a wise speaking that brings healing and holiness. In verse 20, there are those who plan, who work at, who devise, who counsel wholeness. And they produce joy. Right? See how those two go together?
Well, and I like the fact that it says they plan peace. Peace does not happen by accident.
No, that's right. There is a working at it.
Sounds like New Hope.
Sounds like what?
New Hope.
New hope. Blessed are the peacemakers. Right? So, I mean, a lot of this all goes together. And we could spend the next hour still taking it apart. But I think that's a great place to end, is there are those who bring joy and wholeness to their respective communities through the way they behave and speak, and then there are those by the way they speak, tear down and hurt and divide and bring the opposite of wholeness. Yeah. So much more. Let's stop there. Lord, I pray that we would be the kind of people who would bring wholeness and healing to other people. I pray that we would be the kind of people who can listen to rebuke rather than being stupid. Father, help us as those who love Christ to have come out of our mouths true things from a heart made pure by Him. I pray that we would be, each of us, the ministering servants who bring joy and help and healing and wholeness to the people around us. Because we love you, because that's what you do through Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen.